Let me ask you something. If you could have a business with a big staff or no staff and make the same money, which would it be?
Gosh, easy, no staff. Look, I'm sure some of my staff are going to listen to this interview, so that might come across as shocking. We have over 100 members of our team, but reality is that I said, humans are predictably unpredictable. They just don't have consistency. All that said, the true joy and satisfaction in life comes from going through the pain of challenges of overcoming problems which involve people.
A $60 million international toy manufacturing company, multiple single product 8-figure businesses that launched very quickly, and a 100-kilometer race through the freezing mountains of Hong Kong. Just a few bullets from this week's episode with Brad Pedersen. He is not only an interesting human, but a tremendous entrepreneur with a lot to tell you. A few things that we're going to hit on in this episode. Obviously, growing brands quickly, the struggles of manufacturing products and toys in particular, and the leadership and mindset that goes into doing those things. Loved this episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording it. Without further ado, Brad Pedersen. Brad Pedersen, it is awesome to see you. It has been entirely too long.
It has been too long. I think the last time we connected in person, we were shredding some POW at a really amazing resort in British Columbia.
Yes. Oddly, so that was Baldface, Dan Martell's trip. And oddly, I just met somebody from Nelson who actually lives in Nelson, which I thought was the weirdest thing in the world, because why would you live in Nelson? Unless you just want to snowboard all the time, I guess.
Nelson is a significantly underrated town. You've spent a little time there, so you know it, but not only is it beautiful and picturesque, but it attracts the most interesting and eclectic people from around the world. Like, I was there and I met a former conductor from the London Philharmonic Orchestra who chosen to pick up and move his family to Nelson, British Columbia for a life design.
It's so strange to me, and it makes me want to spend more time there for that reason, because this is not the first story that I've heard of this, but I discovered Nelson only because of this Baldface trip every year.
Yeah, and what a trip it is. I mean, hanging out with 48 awesome founders and fascinating people. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, shredding the POW is one of my favorite things to do, but honestly, that is very distant second relative to the rich conversations and relationships that you build.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't, I couldn't agree more. And a cornerstone of my life is deliberately seeking out or creating unique experiences that have heightened emotional engagement. And that usually means physical engagement for me, because it drives relationships fast. And so if you're deliberate about the people that are in the group, the opportunities that you get through things like that are unparalleled.
100%. Yeah, I think it was Jim Rohn who said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And, the idea, and I know you're a runner and I think you like ultra distances. If you want to run faster, run with faster people, right? They will help raise your game and your abilities in terms of what's possible. Actually, thinking of running, I don't know, in the 2012 Olympics, the 100-meter dash that Usain Bolt won, he smashed the Olympic record. And the interesting thing about that race is that Justin Gatlin and the other runner who came in second and third also previously broke the world record or the Olympic record at the time. And when I asked at the end of the race, like, how did they do it? What was the secret to their success in that? Even though they didn't win the race, they still smashed these records. They said, we were just trying to keep up to Usain. So, if you want to run faster, run with faster people.
I love that. Well, that's the sort of updated Roger Bannister story, 4-minute mile. And the recap of that is that, it took hundreds of years to crack the 4-minute mile. And then Roger Bannister did it. And the following year, like 160 people did it. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
What I want to hit on endurance athletics, because you brought it up. But before we talk about some crazy ass, 100-mile mountain climbing run thing that you did in the snow, I want to talk about business because you've also built some crazy ass sizable companies. Um, and you just wrote a book called Startup Santa,
Hmm.
a toy maker's tale of 10 business lessons learned from timeless toys. So I want to talk about that too. But before we get to those things, let's talk about your journey because you wrote a book about making toys and being Santa. So you've made some toy companies. Where did you start and how did that come to be?
Yeah. Well, look, it was definitely not an obvious path. I tell people that my life is a series of happy accidents, and it's really what happens when you remain curious and young at heart. As kids, we think anything is possible, right? Like the imagination of a typical, 7-year-old is just incredible. Like they can fly, they can go to space, they could become, a police officer, a firefighter. I mean, there's just no limits to what their imagination can provide. And, I, as a kid, remained very youthful and alive and I guess full of possibilities because where I grew up, in the prairies of Canada, there was no obvious path to starting a toy company. Everything around me was based upon agriculture or oil. And then I came from a line of chiropractors. My father was a chiropractor. His father and mother were chiropractors, which thinking back that my grandmother was a chiropractor was really kind of very innovative for its time. And then my great grandfather was the very first chiropractor in Denmark. And so ever since I was a little boy, all my dad's colleagues and or friends and family members basically said, one day you're going to grow up and be a chiropractor just like your daddy. And I just kind of assumed that was going to be true. And so when I graduated from high school and I took a year off to do some travel, but went back to college, do post secondary, guess what I was in school to be? I was in school to be a chiropractor because this is what Petersons do. We go on this path towards chiropractic. But again, just kind of staying open to possibilities and youthful. During my teen years, I had shown quite a few entrepreneurial tendencies. I had lots of side hustles where I was making money on the side, and had like a woodcutting business. And then I used to dive in golf course ponds and get golf balls and then sell them in egg cartons for $5. It was no cost of goods and all profit and just my time to make that work. But just always had these like little things going on, and as a result of that, I just was always thinking about like possibilities. And again, playful, young at heart. All through my years, I read an article in a magazine that was a kid who had invented a toy. It was a rags to rich story. I was intrigued. I bought the toys because they were flying toys, and I really love things with flight and fascinated by that. Always have been. Part of the reason why I'm a pilot today. And after playing with this flying toy, I just thought of the possibilities like, well, what if somebody sold these in Canada? Could there be an opportunity to build that? And so I put together a business plan for this kid who, fortunately for me, he was as naive about Canada as I was about the toy business. He accepted the business plan, and suddenly I had a toy distribution business in Canada selling these flying toys. And that's kind of what launched me on this path towards building a toy company that would eventually go on to become the largest toy distribution company in Canada. And after some tumult and ups and downs, pivot to a toy manufacturing company that sold toys all over the planet.
Okay, that's crazy. So I have a lot of questions about this, but one is how old were you when you did that first toy distribution business?
Yeah, 21. So I, I mean, I was playing around with it before that, but I was about 21. That was the year I got married too. So life got real serious.
Wow.
Yeah. So married at 21, starting a toy company 2 years later, having kids. So at 23, bootstrapping, broke, and living in a basement apartment. That was the head office of this grand toy empire. So it was
That sounds like a blast.
yeah,
Um,
I don't recommend it. This is not a life plan decision I would say most people should pursue. But I'm also a big believer that your struggles are what build your strength, and challenges help forge your character. So while it sucked in the moment, it really did suck. It was sort of
yeah,
the beginnings of building something that would ultimately become very formative to my journey.
yeah. I don't think that there is a right way to do life. I actually fundamentally don't believe in right or wrong. I think that there are actions and outcomes. And inside of any situation, if you're driving towards a specific outcome, the actions you take might be positive or negative relative to the outcome, but fundamentally, they're not right or wrong or good or bad. And the benefits of um, throwing yourself into the fire at 21 are definitely significant. You have a lot more time to learn lessons, right? I did not get into entrepreneurship until I was, call it 30, really, 32.
Hmm.
And so, purely from a statistical analysis, I don't have as much time to learn the lessons as somebody that starts at 21. Um, for clarity, you said distribution a number of times. One of the things that I find fascinating about you as a human, knowing more of the story that we're about to dig into, is that you have lots of experience manufacturing and moving product around, which is a totally different type of business than what I'm used to or exposed to. And it's different than what most people do today. You know, we're living in this drop shipping economy. And so a lot of people just look at what can I sell and how can I create a sales and marketing engine where somebody else can do the heavy lifting. With the distribution, were you selling somebody else's product? And what did that look like? What was the construct of that business at 21?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. I mean, things have shifted dramatically, even to my current ventures and how we. And I know we'll get to that probably later. But at that time, I mean, we're talking mid '90s. Direct to consumer was nascent. That was catalog. The Sears catalog was direct to consumer.
Right.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of options, and so how you sold product was really through retail, and it was picking and choosing channels. So yeah, I didn't know how to make things. I mean, again, my background had no basis for actually how do I make products, but I actually kind of, I guess, through curiosity, was pretty good at marketing and selling. And I actually do think that is the most important attribute. Like, if you think today, what is the best product? Like, are the best products the best performing products? And the answer is no. It's usually the best marketed product is the best performing product, right? Like, one could argue all day long, like, is an Apple phone better than a Samsung? And technically speaking, a Samsung's a better device. Apple's a way better marketer. So they lead the
Mm-hmm.
category as a result. And so I would say, I was buying other people's products, and the model is I would go to the factory, buy them. Well, first of all, I had a deal where I had a territory, in this case, Canada. I would go to the factory, buy them from the factory, ship them to my warehouse, and then sell them. And in the beginning, the sales were direct. We actually had kiosks in malls, and that's how we actually moved product. But that wasn't fully scalable, at least not with the systems I had set up. So I understood I had to get into retail. So then we opened up small mom and pops, which eventually led to sort of mid tier. And fast forward to a few years later, we were in mass market and working with all the large retailers across the country. And
And that, sorry to pause you there, but for clarity, that meant that you were soliciting existing small mom and pops and sort of mid market or mid tier businesses and then big box.
correct. Yep.
Got it. So you were functionally a salesperson.
100%. 100 Sales was the focus and the strength. I didn't have to do the manufacturing, but we had to do the sales and then ultimately the marketing. Like, what would drive the consumers to go to the store and actually pull the goods off the shelf, right? Trying to create footsteps to stores, which ultimately then led to reorders down the road.
And we're going to jump 20 years in the future here momentarily with some big wins on this front. But did you stay in toys from that point forward? Or did you just sort of, you mentioned, I can't remember the language you used, but sort of a series of events unfolded in your life, not fully planned. And I think this is super common. It's very unusual for somebody to have a deliberate, um, architected path where they say, hey, this is the criteria of things I'm trying to accomplish in my next business venture. And I'm doing it because it's the most profitable. It creates the best lifestyle. And, you know, and my wife is in line with this as well. Usually people lean into one direction, they get good at it, and they progressively see opportunity through one channel. And it sounds like that's what happened with you.
Yeah, I said my life was a series of happy accidents. and
Yes.
using toys as a metaphor. Toys are often provided as gifts, particularly around the holidays, right? So good gifts come wrapped. Great gifts will come with a bow, but I've come to learn that the best gifts come wrapped in ugly paper. And what I mean by that is that in 2006, I had grown this toy distribution company from a small little, like I said, from my basement startup into becoming the largest toy distribution company in Canada. And we were celebrated in all kinds of magazines and awards. I was nominated as Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year on a speaking circuit, and life was feeling pretty good. Like I was like, hey, I'm a young entrepreneur who has this thing figured out. And what I found out the hard way is that a little bit of ego can add to a lot of overhead. And by growing the company aggressively, we actually got upside down in our covenants to our banks. And the reason for this, and I know this is a big part of like your scaling stories, like what it takes to go from 0 to a million is different than we need to go from a million on beyond a million, hence the name of your podcast. I had built my foundation on systems that were not sustainable. And when you grow a distribution company, again, going back to that model, you're buying goods from a factory, you're bringing them to a warehouse, you then ship them to customers who take 30, 60, 90 days to pay you. And the bigger you grow that, the bigger constraint it is on your cash flow. So you need more and more cash. And as we had progressed from going from small retailers like mom and pops to larger mass market retailers, our margins got thinner. So we're scaling a business, growing it, increasing the constraints or the strains on our cash flow, and getting more meager profit margins in the process. And one day we woke up and went, oops, we just built this big company on a house of cards, literally. And so the banks called their loan. We got forced into special loans. We wrestled with it for a couple of years, trying to fix it. I brought in some new capital, but the foundation was really broken. And ultimately, we went from a restructuring, which is a fancy word for bankruptcy, to 2 years later to ultimately bankrupting the company. The gift in that, and this goes back to your comment on what happens, right? Like you decide what it means. It's ultimately what happens is your choice to determine what it becomes. And so I could have basically said, okay, it was tough. I got handed a really bad hand of cards in this case, and they just didn't play my way, and just simply rolled over and opted out. But instead, I chose to take the learnings. In other words, I'm a big believer that we don't learn from what happens. We learn from actually reflecting on what happens and then taking those lessons, unpacking them, and applying them to a better path forward. So that unhappy accident that happened at that time in my life forced me to think through a path forward. And it was really clear. The decision was, okay, I've built all these reps in the toy business. I have relationships. I have credibility. I just unfortunately built the wrong business model on that. So how can I fix it? So it went from being a distribution company to a manufacturing company, went from being focused on Canada to being focused on a global market instead. And I wanted to work on, instead of building brands, to focus on borrowing the equity from other brands through licensing. And then the final piece, which was really important, is instead of having warehouses full of product, I wanted to build orders on a custom basis where I'd ship direct from our factories to the customer and not have the cash constraint up front. And that became the basis of launching a new business in 2009. And that business ultimately became infinitely more scalable, sustainable, and ultimately sellable than my other business would have been. And I never would have found that possibility if I hadn't been punched in the nose with that unhappy accident of going into bankruptcy with my first company. And so that was a bunch there. So maybe I'll pause. And if you have any other thoughts or ideas or questions, I'm happy to lean in.
I do. Well, so I think that one of the things that I love about my core business, Easy Pay Direct, is that we underwrite businesses. And what that means is we get to know how they operate. We want to understand who they are, what they do, what they sell, how they sell it, how they deliver it, et cetera. Which then gives tremendous stability because we get the business model, right? Which in your language would mean that we wouldn't need to, in our case, it's hold money or close an account because we did effective underwriting.
Right.
In your business, the analogy with you is we wouldn't need to call the loan, right? We
Right.
would have seen the business model and understood it ahead of time, even if you didn't. But one of the things I like about it is this thorough understanding of business models. And that leaves me with weird questions that are nuanced about people's business models when they start to tell me. So you mentioned moving into toy manufacturing, but you also mentioned licensing other products, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So were you manufacturing not your own toys, but manufacturing toys for other companies, or was it both, or what did that look like?
Yeah, combination of both. 100% right. In the end, we were, as an example, manufacturing Light Bright, which is a brand that I think most people are familiar with from growing up. Now, that's not something we came up with. It's not our idea, but an inventor had sold the rights to Hasbro, and Hasbro had it in their sort of archive of toys, but they weren't making it anymore. So we said, hey, we'll make that toy. We'll pay you a royalty. And they agreed to that. So, and or it could be like going to a place like Disney and saying, hey, we want to make the Spider-Man, night lights, which we made. And so again, we borrowed the equity from a brand that they put a lot of marketing into, and we made the toys and paid them a royalty as a result. So it's much easier to do that in the toy business than it is to build a Barbie or a Hot Wheels or a Lego, which, you can probably number on two hands the number of iconic toys that actually have stood the test of time. Toys tend to be very fad focused. They come and they go. When they're hot, they're super hot, but then they're gone and you don't hear about them again, or it takes some time for them to come back again, like a Cabbage Patch or a Furby. But to have these like lasting legacy brands is really hard to do, I think, in life in general, but the toy business certainly accentuates it.
So what I think I heard you said, it's very hard to build a Barbie, a Furby, etc. And you don't mean it's hard to build the toy. You mean it's hard to build the brand.
Correct. Yep.
But building the toy doesn't sound easy either. It sounds like a fucking nightmare to me as somebody that is in the digital space, dealing with bits moving around, and zeros and ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you did not have any experience doing this. Why did you think that creating a manufacturing company to manufacture toys was a good idea?
Well, look, I always felt a little conflicted having a toy distribution company that we never really controlled our destiny, right? That ultimately we were distributing somebody else's IP. And I would say I actually had a little bit of the imposter phenom in my life, saying that I don't think I'm good as a toy business owner until I've actually made something. So I was always very curious about the manufacturing, and we started kind of teasing it out. Even in the distribution company days, we started trying to make some stuff. And you're 100% right. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And we made a ton of mistakes and spent stupid money chasing the idea of manufacturing because, that was back before 3D printers. So to do a prototype, I remember the very first prototype we made was like $35,000 US just for a prototype to prove whether or not this idea could work. That didn't, and then beyond that, you're spending, in this case, it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in tooling for that particular product. So you could be, easily $500,000 to $1 million in product development even before you see the potential of turning $1, right? So that was very daunting, and we made the mistakes of learning some of those expensive lessons up front. But this is all your problems typically are not what problems, but who problems. Who are the people you need to know, or who are the companies you need to be associated with? Which kind of comes back again to the power of networking that we talked about at the beginning. That if you think your problems are currently a stalling point, you just haven't met the right people yet who can actually help provide access and or influence to advance the cause. And so I just had to change my mind about manufacturing being hard and ask the question, what would need to be true for manufacturing to be easy? And when we started thinking about it that way, we started coming up with a bunch of ideas that actually provided innovation. We started to think, hey, at that time, North American toy manufacturing was largely handled in North America, with some offices in Asia that would basically do the bidding of the North American offices, and then factories who made that on behalf. We innovated by actually sending a team of people from Canada to Hong Kong, setting an office in Hong Kong near the factories, and in real time make products. And this was a huge advantage in terms of speed to market. And instead of spending a bunch of money on North American prototype manufacturing, we started using our factories and their local prototype makers. And, it was like, if something cost $30,000 to do here, we could do it there for 3,000. It was like 1/10 the cost. So we had speed, we had efficiency, we had all these things in place, and we were being very nimble to be able to respond to it. And these are just, again, unpacking the learnings of like, well, what would need to be true and who do I need to know in order for this to look easy? And if you ask that question, I think it helps you drive to outcomes that are ultimately going to be better and optimize and perhaps even be innovative in your space.
So one of the gaps that I have that I think a lot of people have is, or I tell myself that, is sort of the gap between the fundamental concept, like what would need to be true in that question, this ethereal question, or who do I need to know? It's who, not what, and the tactical application of that, right? What's the end goal? And one of the things that occurred to me as I was listening to that, thinking of who, was I frequently, when I think of who, think about who would know about it, who would have access to it. And maybe it's also who can I hire now? What was the who for you in the manufacturing process? Who was it, and what role did they fill? Were you seeking information? Were you seeking connections? Were you looking for somebody that could do the manufacturing for you? Who was the who, or what was it?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll step back and talk about the type of role, because the person is less about the outcome the person is supposed to produce. So my biases at that time were very much focused on, I need to find local North American toy engineers and makers. That was the sort of the thinking of the day. And when I challenged myself to like, well, what would easy look like? And then ask the who question, it became very clear to me that it needs to be people who have an experience for design, who can then work closely with factories in Asia who have access to low cost prototyping to advance product development at a rapid pace and very efficiently. So the type of role I then landed on is that I need a really strong person who's great with design, who can come up with the ideas and design them. So an industrial designer type personality with that strength, combined with an operational person in Asia who could execute. Because typically, the left and right brains need to have these complementary roles to each other. And so I ended up landing on, one of my team members was Canadian, that I ended up moving to Hong Kong to lead the design. Super smart, super bright design person who could like lead product design and packaging, and then combined him with a gal that worked for an agency in Hong Kong, had tons of manufacturing experience. And agencies are typically the go-between between factories and the North American head offices. They kind of do the bidding of the North American offices, ensure it's happening at the factory. But she was very competent and capable on the ground. But she was the yin and yang of operationally executing on his ideas. So he came up with the ideas that we would all brainstorm together, but he would ultimately have to execute on them. And then she operationalized them. And it's the idea of visionary integrator. You need those two dynamics to work together, and having them together near the source just gave us that unfair advantage of being able to execute quickly and very efficiently.
Wild. So ask better questions is one of the lessons I got out of that. I have to ask, I know it's granular, but where did you find them? I mean, was it because you had a bunch of connections in the toy industry already? But how did you come across anybody that wanted to go live in Hong Kong and do this, and also the intermediary?
Well, it sounds trite to say it, but it starts with a dream, right? I mean, people are not interested in who you are or what you currently do, but where you're going. People want to be on a train that's going somewhere and being part of something exciting. And really, to attract the people you want, you first have to have this really bold vision and purpose. Like, this is the dent we're going to put in the universe. Have very clear this delineated mission of what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to do it, and then the values behind it. And if you're really clear on that, and then you articulate it well, you'll find that there's people who actually think that's cool, and they want to be a part of that as well, and are willing to sacrifice their most valuable asset, which is their life force, their time, to help contribute to get it done. And, the people you start with typically are not going to be the people you finish with, right? There's two different types of people. And that's certainly something I'm a big believer that you're constantly evolving. Like for a snake to grow, it has to shed its skin. It can't stay stagnant. And likewise, you want to give your team members every opportunity to grow and to grow themselves into the people they need to become to handle your growth, but also understand that some people are going to hit their ceiling complexity and just can't move past that place. So to answer your question, it's an ongoing process. It's not a one and done. You are going to be continually advancing and changing the teams. In fact, the person that I hired to lead design ultimately wasn't the person who went forward with the Go Forward company. It was somebody we had to change out. And what I'm most proud of is that they self-selected. They actually said, you know what? I was good to this point, but now this is beyond my areas of competency and capabilities. And I need to let somebody else take it from here. And if you have a really big vision and mission, you know what? People really will subscribe to that if they're the right people. That is something I would say even in my current company. We talk about we're a mission with a company, and we're very vocal about it, and we really lean into it. And something I'm very proud of in my current company is in the last 18 months, 3 of my C-suite leaders have self-selected that they're not the right people to go to the next level. And 2 of those 3 actually helped pick their replacements. Like we're involved in the interview, like saying, I'm not leaving right away, but I definitely am not the right person to take you forward. And I will help pick my replacement. And which is super cool. And I think uncommon in general, but it is really, when you attract missionaries versus mercenaries, this is the type of outcomes you can expect from top performing leaders, that they want to be a part of ensuring that the mission and the vision of the company actually are fulfilled.
Man, there's a lot there. And my general belief on this is that you can build companies both ways. And there are people that can just grind it out and pull everyone through. I should say, pull their whole team through something. And then there are others that just attract it to happening. And it seems like from the litany of entrepreneurs I know and looking at the different size and scope of the businesses, sort of the lighthouse effect of shining a bright light and attracting the boats instead of the tugboat and pulling people through is an easier, more fun path.
For sure.
But it also requires clarity of vision, mission, outcomes. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. And some of that is that there isn't really a mission in a lot of companies. And it's sort of this contrived framework that entrepreneurs feel like they're supposed to have.
Yep.
But there isn't a huge vision behind it. So I want to talk about the vision relative to the toy company. And then I want to fast forward because your current companies certainly have mission first. And it's very, very, very clear. And I had Matt Bertulli on maybe last year. We did an episode and talked about, who's your business partner. Yep. We talked about the current companies. So I know with Pela and Lomi, there's this huge driving force of mission. But with the toys, what did that look like in a toy company? Were you trying to be Santa Claus? What's going on here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that, life is an iterative learning process, and by the way, it still is for me. I haven't arrived yet. I'm a work in progress, but hopefully every stage is a stepping stone to the process of becoming the person that you can be. My goal in life, and you share this one, is that I want to wear out, not rust out. I want to make sure that when I'm on my deathbed, that I can say I've left it all behind on the field of life, right? That there's nothing left in the tank, that all the possibilities within me were explored to their fullest extent. So back to what kind of vision and mission, I think what you said is so true in terms of most mission and vision statements are simply a did it, park it, it's collecting dust on the shelf, right? It was just a part of what I had to do because, I read this book by Jim Collins and he said I have to do that. So I got it and done. And it doesn't become anything beyond that. And here's the reality. 2 things. Number 1, we get paid for the value we create in the marketplace. Like our compensation comes from creating value, which means you're solving a problem for somebody, right? There's problem solving in what you do, which is creating value. And that on its own has a purpose and mission. You're creating value by solving somebody's problem. And the more you do that, the more value you're creating in the marketplace. That on its own. They're very, like what Elon Musk is doing relative to what you're doing, to what I'm doing. They're all different, but at the end of the day, they're creating value, right? So the second piece of that is that people's identity is really wanting to be attached to something beyond just showing up for work. Like if you say, hey, just come to work and collect a paycheck, I know there's businesses that do that, but that ultimately it lacks any kind of teeth and meaning. If you want to create teams that really want to be engaged and leaning in, they need to know that their life force, which again is their most valuable thing they have, actually is doing something that is going to make impact and last. And the business of business is people, right? We see these companies, we see the logos, but behind that is a bunch of people who are, predictably unpredictable emotional beings, and who are looking for creating some kind of meaning. So, of the top 5 reasons why people come to a role in a job, most people that are like you and I that are employing people, we think the most important one is compensation. The truth is, that's actually number 5. First and most important is, what is the opportunity? How can I be a part of this opportunity? Secondly, what's my ability to grow? Third is how association with the type of people that I like lift me up, that are going to challenge me. And then finally is that, what is my impact from the role I'm going to be in? Finally, it's hopefully I'm going to be compensated well. We flip it upside down and we do it wrong. So I think it's really important that you define your vision and mission, get clear on the value you're creating. Secondly, that you then use it in a meaningful way, not one and done, park on the shelf. You communicate it on a regular basis through all hands monthly, through your weekly engagement with people, like recognizing people, calling them out, like, I saw how you were living out our value. It's the North Star of your company. And instead of when I have to have difficult conversations with anyone on our team, it's never me versus them, which is like a personality thing. It's more of, hey, let's sit on the same side of the desk and let's look out at our values and a mission and vision and everything we agree to. How is our current behavior congruent with what we are trying to achieve? And it becomes very obvious that you're now sitting beside each other about the outcomes you're trying to achieve versus the, hey, you need to listen to me because I'm the leader, yada, yada, yada dynamics, which don't really go that well in businesses. And finally, I just want to add one other really powerful insight that I learned not that long ago. So I'm a part of a business forum that includes Dave Liniger, who is the founder of Remax. I mean, this guy's a titan of business. Remax, one of the top 10 global brands, billionaire. I mean, he's done it all. He's an incredible human. And we were sitting around in a fireside chat with him, and somebody asked him, what was his greatest regret in business? And I kind of like, oh man, I'm going to lean in on this because this is some deal that he missed out on, or maybe he overplayed his hand, or what was this incredible insight I was going to learn from? And his response, which was quick, was, I didn't fire people fast enough. And I was like, what? That's your greatest regret? And then he went on to unpack and say, look, there's 3 people you're letting down when you hang on to somebody beyond their best by date. Number 1 is you're letting yourself down because you can no longer trust them with the work that you're handing them. You have to like overcompensate and over inspect. And actually you think you're doing them a favor. So you're creating this kind of dysfunctional codependency by hanging on to them. And that actually is not serving you as well. So that's a problem. Number 2, you're letting the team around them down because those people all know that their work is substandard. It's the unsaid truth in the meeting. Quite frankly, you're setting a new standard within your organization that is less than really what it should be by keeping them there. And then the third one, which really got me, is he said, you're letting them down because that person has got some genius and some skill and some value to serve in the marketplace to create value. It's just not with you. And you hanging on to them is preventing them from finding their better future. And I was like, wow, like boom, blow my mind in terms of just didn't expect it, but how true it really was. So anyways, I have applied. I mean, we're not looking to go fire a bunch of people just for the sake of firing them. We literally are constantly evaluating our team though to see, are they in congruence with our values, with our mission and our vision? And do they have the capabilities and competency to be able to advance us to the level we're going? And that's the criteria.
I think that one of the things that would benefit every entrepreneur is to take a moment or 30 to evaluate the statements that seem cliche and figure out why they are said so often and how they actually tactically apply to their life. And I had heard this construct of you're doing them a favor by firing them. And I just thought that sounds like some contrived bullshit. I was like, this is like, yeah, okay, that's how we rationalize feeling better about it. And as I reflected on this over and over and over and over, it became clear that like this isn't a dysfunctional human. They are trying to fill a role that they are not well equipped to fill, or there's a misalignment. Maybe even they're equipped to fill the role in a different company that has a different value set, but either the KPIs are a mismatch or the value set is a mismatch. And it ultimately led me to a place of wanting to hire and fire by values and KPIs. And that's my, guiding light, my North Star, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I'm consistently learning that lesson over and over and over. Let me ask you something. If you could have a business with a big staff or no staff and make the same money, which would it be?
Gosh, easy, no staff.
Yeah. It sounds like you do very well with staff.
Yep.
But they're also unpredictable and much more difficult to systemize than no staff.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure some of my staff are going to listen to this interview, so that might come across as shocking. But the reality is that I said humans are predictably unpredictable. They just don't have consistency of, when you set an algorithm in place, it consistently shows up every time. People are not the same. All that said, the true joy and satisfaction in life comes from going through the pain of challenges of overcoming problems which involve people. And so while it is, I think for most entrepreneurs, creates some discomfort and maybe some heartburn that they've got big stuff, because we have over 100 members of our team. At the same time, it's one of the greatest joys. And one thing I'm most proud of is that I've helped build this really impressive team who's on a mission. But at the same time, if I could, as a good operator and entrepreneur, your goal is to eliminate risk, mitigate risks. And part of that is people. So if you gave me the choice, it would be a no-brainer as an operator to do that.
And you're clearly a very good operator. So let's jump to Tech for Kids, which was one of the, was this the toy manufacturing company?
Correct. Yes.
Great. So frame for people. What I've got, fact check me here, but Tech for Kids scaled to 60 million plus before merging with another company and leaning into a roll-up strategy to create a bigger entity. Is that all accurate?
That's correct. Yep. You nailed it.
So I want to talk about the roll-up strategy and kind of the logistics of how that worked and get that narrative, because that's also something that I think some entrepreneurs get exposure to, and many just never fall into the M&A side of things because they don't build a company to sell, or they don't do their homework and don't go after it. And whether it's the right choice for them or not. But I think hearing the stories and the nuances, the positive and negative sides to it are helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So here's the hard reality for every founder who raises money. If you've raised money, you've agreed to sell your company. Now, if you bootstrap your company, you've given yourself optionality to sell it or not. But if you brought in investors, the outcome they're expecting is an exit at some point. And there's a number of different ways to do that, right? There's the sale of the company. There's an IPO as an example. And in this case, an M&A strategy is what we decided to pursue. Part of that is because we actually went down the path of, the investors that came in when I bankrupted my first company, put more capital in to launch this new company, which, by the way, is out of character. And there's a whole nother story as to why that's crazy on its own mind, because usually good money doesn't follow bad money. They typically say we're out, but they decided to follow in because they wanted to recover their initial investment. And that loan was $1 million at 24% interest. So it was, kept me up late at night to make sure that I had that repaid as quick as possible. But
Ouch.
anyways, they were looking for an exit. And by 2016, they'd been with me since 2006. So 10 years, it was time. And so we engineered an opportunity for them to do that through merging with a similar company in the US. And the whole play was really, we were going to take the two companies, so top line, combine them. With that, we were going to be a healthy 9 figures. We would trim our staffs and operations. We'd consolidate, and it would just produce more profitability. And then we would take our influence and expertise in the business to go acquire other small or mid-sized toy cos and roll them up underneath. And eventually we would go public someday. That was basically the thesis. And it worked. We actually acquired a company in the midst of the merger and bolted that in, and that added value. And we actually attracted a bunch of investors who wanted to invest into this new roll up. But I found out the hard way that when you go from a majority shareholder to a minority shareholder and lose control of your ability to vote, that you literally can lose control of your destiny. So 90 days after I merged the company and we had done this successful acquisition of another toy co, I got fired. And the reason why is the two companies' cultures were just very different. I kind of knew this going in, that we just had different ways that we worked. But on paper, it looks so good. And also it provided the outcomes financially that I was hoping for. And so I was willing to look past it, hoping that, we would figure it out. And in retrospect, I now know there's no such thing as merger. There's only acquisition. One culture is going to prevail. And my culture did not prevail. And I got, voted off the island of a company I founded, which at the time was terrible. But in retrospect, the best gifts come wrapped in ugly paper, because it freed me up to a brand new future, new possibilities, and reimagine what it might look like, and ultimately led to where I am today as an entrepreneur who's focused on the things I really care about, with sustainability and impact. But that was, again, a bit of a circuitous path to get to that outcome. Not the obvious path.
So, that's my nightmare. I hear stories about getting kicked out of your own company, and there are these iconic ones like Steve Jobs, and what a crazy path. And then there are just horrific ones that don't have a happy ending. uh, what? So you got kicked out of the company, but presumably you didn't lose your equity, or did you?
Yeah, no, I didn't lose the equity. And it's kind of a longer story, but just by staying the course, and this is coming back to your opening comments, like there's nothing good or bad. You decide whether it is, right? I think Viktor Frankl was ultimately one of the best examples when he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Like they could take away all of his freedoms, all his apparent choices, but the one thing they could never take away was his ability to choose his response. So I've come to learn that the formula is simple. Event plus response equals outcome, and you choose your response. And so, fast forward to, I ended up that my shares got bought by them after some back and forth and a little bit of, I would say, just strategery, use George Bush Jr.'s term. And it was a happy outcome that just gave me freedom to choose a new path and a new future, and ultimately to invest into things that I was truly passionate about.
Well, let's, I know we're coming up on time, but let's hit on the current venture a little bit, because we've teased on it a little, but Pela and Lomi are fascinating, largely for the reasons that you just said, or that you keep talking about, which are mission, values first.
Yeah.
And it's a mission with a company, not a company with a mission. And that construct is probably mind breaking to 99% of entrepreneurs out there, because they are not so fortunate as to be clear on their own mission or the things that are truly important to them. What most people are clear on as an entrepreneur, and I don't fault them because I am one of them, is I want to create something that facilitates the rest of my life, or is in alignment with the rest of my life, while producing an ecosystem for the employees to uplift them and a product for the clients. But it is not mission first, save the world. And Pela and Lomi kind of are. Can you tell me about those products and what you sell, and kind of where you're at with them?
Yeah, look, you had a chance to meet my business partner, Matt, who is a brilliant entrepreneur, brilliant marketer, and somebody who, I really am grateful as business partner. We really, before we got into our business partnership, we really spent the time to ensure that there was alignment in terms of our capabilities, our competencies, our values, and, on the other side of that, we've formed a really special partnership, and grateful for that. But ultimately, we're waste innovation companies. It started with Pela case, and Pela is the world's first compostable phone case, and it doesn't seem like an obvious problem, except for the fact that $20 billion worth of phone cases are sold every year because people keep changing them up every 2 to 3 years, and a case is made out of something that is designed to last a long time. Like most plastics last hundreds, and in some cases thousands of years. And so we started the idea, could we make this out of a material that would have this sort of grace end of life? And, we've since sold to millions of customers around the world with that product. I tell people it's making recompense for the billions of pieces of plastic that I've sold around the planet, all to put smiles on kids' faces. But it really was a way for me to kind of undo some of the things that I did in my past. And again, I appreciate I was given the freedom and optionality to do it. Lomi is kind of the unexpected great that, the problem we ran into there is that, most people don't have access to home composting or composting infrastructure to handle cases. So we challenged the assumption of what would need to be true that would give people access to composting infrastructure. And it started off with, well, let's create an industrial composting facility, and that's hundreds of millions of dollars. So we said, that's no fly. Well, let's create a machine that everyone could put in their home. And so Lomi takes all organic waste and turns it into a nutrient dense dirt that we call Lomi Earth, that is an amazing soil supplement that plants simply love. And that has been, we launched that on a crowdfunding campaign in April 21. Our goal was to raise, $1 million. We raised $9 million. It became the biggest clean tech crowdfunding campaign of all time. And we've been able to inspire people about the possibilities of thinking different, and that they actually can make meaningful change as it comes to climate change, instead of just sitting back and watch it happen. So yeah, it's been very soulfully rewarding and exciting to be a part of the journey.
So you have a magic machine that makes dirt. I love it. And I truly look at it that way. It is this crazy thing that you put on your counter or wherever, and you throw food scraps in it instead of composting. It just turns them into dirt in 24 hours. Um, I do think it's a magical device.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that's super cool. I have to hit on, I at least get a story about. I mean, I want you to tell us the story, but I want to know the parallels. So I've done some ultra length endurance events, and we have talked about a specific one that you went after, and I want you to, in Japan, if I'm not mistaken,
Hong Kong.
and I want you to tell this. Hong Kong. Sorry, thank you. I want you to tell that story, but first, how do you see endurance athletics fitting in with your entrepreneurial adventures, if at all? Are there lessons that you get from it? Is there a parallel? Is it a release? How does it work in your life? Like, it's a hell of a lot of energy. Why do you do it?
Yeah, I love this question. Look, I think as I think back on my journey, the key to my learnings to this point in time is that there is a compound effect that comes from consistently showing up and doing the work day in, day out. We see success. You see like the Zuckerbergs and the Musks, and you just see like achievement and awards and things like that. But what you don't see behind that is the hundreds and thousands of hours put in doing the work. Like you're just seeing the very shiny tip of the possibility, but behind that, it was mostly boring and monotonous, and in some cases heartbreaking. So as I think about ultra racing, you can't do ultra racings just at a whim. This is something you have to be willing to do the work. So the parallels are perfect. That, when I first started training, so I decided to do this race real quickly. The background, I was going to Hong Kong. I had an office there, as you already heard about. And I learned about the Gurkhas, right? These were basically the badasses of World War II. And they were Nepalese warriors who had incredible endurance. And the British forces would send them in for kind of doing their SEALs work back at that time. And they trained in Hong Kong. And a rite of passage to their sort of final feat is they had to run this 100-kilometer course through the mountains of Hong Kong, which if you haven't been there, they're not big mountains, but they're really challenging. They're steep and pitchy. You're going through jungle. It's the trail's not awesome. It's hard. And they had to wear these heavy packs and they had to complete it in a very short period of time. And I always was amazed at that. And I asked the question of myself, could I do that? Right? I don't know. One of my mentors, Jim Rohn, said, in life, you may not be able to do all you find out, but make sure you find out all you can do. So it's like, well, can I do that? And so I set a goal to try, even though I've never been. I was a sprinter growing up, not an ultra or distance runner, but I just set the goal to test myself. And I attempted in 2016. We got 60 kilometers in. And by the way, I should back up and say my very first run training for this event, I did 3 kilometers and it almost killed me. But, like I was like at the end of 3 kilometers, like, this is crazy. But,
Let me also do quick conversions for the stupid Americans. 100 kilometers is 60 miles, just frame of reference.
Yes, exactly.
62.
Exactly. Thank you. So I started from very humble beginnings, but it's that mastery is found on the mountaintop of mistakes and just continually persisting through the pain. There's got to be purpose on the other side of your pain. And like I said, the struggles will build strength. The challenges help build your character. And so that first race, I got to 60 kilometers. So it was about 35 miles, I think. There was a freak ice storm. I was in the back of the mountains in Hong Kong. I was actually pictures of my pack with ice on it. And I went into a tent to warm up and I got hypothermic and ended up having to not complete the race that time and felt really distraught because a lot of training to get to that point only to fail. And I was later consoled by the fact they canceled the race because of the extreme weather and the ice storm and there's a bunch of runners that were in the hospital from falling and hypothermia and stuff like that. So that was somewhat consoling, but I decided the year after I had to go back and finish it. And so I did. And all I can say is 21 and a half hours. I don't think there was anything left. I actually write about it in my book. Like I just kind of unpack like everything that happened along the mile markers. Cause it was literally what I've come to learn is it's the 6 inches between your ears that ultimately determine the outcome because your body can do incredible things, but your mind is telling it all kinds of silliness. And I think it's true for, entrepreneurship as well. Like it's not what the thoughts you think, it's telling yourself the thoughts you need to have. Because what comes to your mind is often just a very immature, not well thought through. I tell people my first thought is rarely my best thought. And it's more about telling yourself what you need to hear to overcome the 6 inches that's telling you what potentially is holding you back or why you should quit and why there's too much pain and now it's time to stop. So speaking through the possibilities is something that that race really taught me.
Love that. I have a very good friend who is a musician, Jay Hobbs, and he has a song and a line, I am not my mind. And it very much is along that path of we all have these thoughts rushing through our head nonstop. That does not mean that is you, and it does not mean that is where you have to go. I love that. That's great. Well, Brad, I appreciate you carving out time. It is awesome to get time to talk to you, whether it is in a lodge in the middle of nowhere, British Columbia, or perhaps on a trail in Hong Kong someday. Probably not around 3 for you on that one, though, I imagine.
No.
Your book is going to be out shortly. Startup Santa, a toy maker's tale of 10 business lessons learned from timeless toys. I'm looking forward to reading that. Is there anywhere else you want to point people in the meantime?
Look, I think if you want to learn about the businesses, go to pelacase.com or lomi.com. I said, we're committed to creating a waste-free future, and this is the idea, having a mission with the company. And I think you're going to learn a lot about our culture and what we do and why we do it. And if you want to find about me personally, you can go to my website, which is bradpedersen.com. And Pedersen is spelled not the way you think it is. It's all with E's and D's. So bradpedersen.com and or startupsantabook.com. And you can find that we've put some free resources and things like that there as well. So
I love it. But we will put all of that in the show notes. And probably the next time will be in British Columbia. So I will look forward to that.
Yeah, man. Can't wait. It's coming up quick. Winter's an exciting time in this part of the world, and look forward to hosting you in our lovely province once again. It's a beautiful place.
Can't wait. Brad, thanks for the time, man.
Cheers. All the best.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million: the podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.